Here we go then. This week's Matchbook Weekend Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ali Maxwell, and three guests on this weekend. Searching for value, there should be no stone left unturned, because with me, as you can see, if you're watching the live stream, Adrian Clarke joins us again this week. Hello, Adrian. A busy man, of course, as always.
Yeah, always busy, but look, it's not like a proper job, is it, talking about football? So, yeah, it's all good.
Certainly not. Mark O'Hare, what about being part of the punting world? Does that feel like a proper job?
It can do at times, Ali. Yeah, I've actually quite enjoyed this midweek, the FA Cup week, and cup football around Europe. It means I don't take a huge amount of interest in it. I like to sort of try and rest, recuperate, and focus on the weekend. So it's been a bit of a welcome, kind of easy week compared to probably the next fortnight coming.
And Nick Goff's also here. Goffy, since we last had you on, your team, Wolves, have become the best team in the land. So congratulations.
Yeah, we are probably rated the highest team in Europe now, I think. The way it's going, it was brilliant at Spurs on Sunday. Had a nice trip to Espanyol, dodging the corona last week. So that's why I wasn't on the show. Yeah, Wolves are great. It's good time.
Very good time. Well, we've got some smashing games to get into this weekend as well, not least the Manchester derby in the Premier League. That's where we will begin. As I said, with all three of you on today, there should be plenty of value in what you have to say. So let's look at Manchester United against Manchester City. United at Old Trafford, 5.3 to win this game. Man City, 1.625, and the draw 4.4. We're recording this on Thursday morning. Prices are, of course, subject to change. Manchester United plus a goal on the Asian handicap, 1.892, and Man City -1, 2.04. Over 2 3/4 goals is 1.84, and the under 2.06. So, Mark O'Hare, we'll start from a strictly punting perspective. It's an interesting game here. This is the fourth time they've played each other this season. What have we learned from those games? What can we take into this one in terms of finding a selection?
I think we can learn quite a lot from what we've seen so far. I mean, I've no major issue with the main match odds prices here. We know that City's best is streets better than United's best, and they went off at 1.5 at Old Trafford last season. Slightly larger this time around. I think that's probably accounted to the state of play of the season, where the City are, what's at play for them, and potentially Laporte's absence as well. I think from a punting perspective, I kind of like United with the plus goal start on the Asian handicap here. At the end of the day, it's still quite a keenly contested derby. Still quite hard to play for here for United, especially. City obviously won't want to lose either. But I've just been digging through City's record in the big games against the big six teams since the start of 2017-18, which was the first of their two title-winning campaigns. They've won 9 of 14 trips to the big six, as well as this season's Leicester, which is very strong, obviously, as you'd expect. But only 5 of those games were won by 2 or more goals. Which is effectively, just more than a third, really. The odds here suggest that City have around about just below a 50% chance of winning or beating the Asian handicap line of 1 goal. Now, only one of those 5 wins were by 2 goals or more came when they conceded. And obviously, if you look at Laporte's record and City's record with and without him, clean sheets decreased by 16%, goals per game against increased from 0.59 to 1.07. Their win rate drops, as do their wins by 2 or more goals. And Laporte's been missing for 7 games against big six teams at any venue. And City are only twice beaten this handicap line. Both games are away at Arsenal, which, I'm not being facetious, but they are probably the weakest team of those 6 teams. So
yeah, I've ordered them. Scandal.
I could have been a lot worse, Adrian. But De Bruyne is obviously a major injury concern now as well after missing midweek too. So, but you asked about what have we learned? Well, we've learned that United have excelled in the games against the big teams this season. I think they've made progress with Bruno Fernandes, kind of linking midfield to attack. Defensively, they've found a bit of balance and solidity recently, but it's those performances against City and against the big teams which stand out. It's the ability to sit deep in the low block and play on the counter-attack. Had great success at the Etihad in the reverse game. One of the best performances I've seen against a big team for a couple of years too. And they've only lost once against the top 8 this year. Only lost Anfield to 2 goals or more when they conceded in the last kick of the game. And City have only won 3 of 9 against the top 7, despite really dominating those matches as well. So I just looked at the line and I thought, I'd rather be United with that start than asking City to overcome it. So I know the schedule's a little bit off for City, having to a day less to prepare for this and going Thursday, Sunday. But they've done that the last couple of weeks now with Europa League football too. So they should be accustomed to it. So yeah, I think United with a start is fair enough.
Adrian, I think it was last week, perhaps the one before, where we spoke about United, and we wanted to give Ole Gunnar Solskjaer a little bit of credit for tactical flexibility, for having more than one system and working out when he deploys those systems. It looks like this might be an occasion to revert to that back five that has seen them play rather well defensively, as Mark's noted, in these big games this season.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, they did pretty well last weekend, 4-4-2 diamond, wasn't it? I kind of expected them to go for a back three against Everton's front two, but they went with the four and it worked out okay. Completely concur with what Mark was saying. Their defensive record against the top seven this season is outstanding. 6 goals conceded in 9 matches against the top 7. So they know how to go into these big games and be really solid. And as Mark pointed out, one of those goals at Liverpool was very, very late on when they were pushing. So they know how to negate teams. City will dominate the game. We know that will happen. But it feels as if United, if not having City's measure, they certainly won't be afraid of Manchester City. What goes against them is that the away team tends to win this fixture, as it has happened, I think, across the last 7 derbies. The away team's won 6 times. So history says City will win. We know City are stronger. But for me, Manchester United have got enough. Midfield, which is obviously a really strong area for City with Rodri and De Bruyne in there. I think Fred is playing well enough to handle it. And cast your mind back to the game at the Etihad. Fred was outstanding against Rodri, and I think he won that individual duel. If he can win that again today, at the weekend rather, with McTominay there, Matic, Bruno Fernandes, I think United have got a chance. So yeah, I'm leaning towards the same pick as Mark, and I think 5.3 is a good price for them on home turf.
What are you leaning towards, Nick? Anything that we've spoken about, or anything new, perhaps?
Quite annoyingly, I sort of agree with everything the other two have said. So I'm not going to have too much new to add here. 4th meeting of the season, the United have performed admirably for the 3, but the game that sandwiched them, they were absolutely outplayed. The first leg of the semi-final. So which one are we going to get here? We've seen 2 cases of United deal with them really well, and one time when they were just outplayed and outgunned. And we could get either of the two. But I am leaning towards us getting that better United performance here. But because they're so unpredictable, it's hard to make this anywhere near your best bet of the weekend, Man United +1. I thought they were a bit fortunate to get out of Goodison with a point. But then the week before that, they played so well at Chelsea and really deserved, they got that game plan spot on at Chelsea, played it well. Even at Anfield, they kept Liverpool at bay at 1-0 until the very last minute, even though they were outplayed through the game. So they can keep themselves in these games. I don't want to get too carried away with Bruno Fernandes after 3 or 4 games, but he does look like he's changed the United side and has added something that they were really missing. From City's perspective, workmanlike in the cup final rather than particularly impressive. I don't think any motivation should really ever be needed for a derby, but it does feel like this game's more important to Man United now than it is to City, with 4th being really there, or even 5th perhaps, if City are out of the Champions League next year. So this game has got more riding on it for United than for City. City obviously are targeting the Champions League now. If they're not going to be able to play in it for the next 2 years, it becomes even more important. And I'm sure they'd like to stick 2 fingers up at UEFA and win that tournament this year. So hesitantly, Man United +1 is the side that I'd be, but it's nowhere near a great bet, and I think the market's probably about right. But there's enough for me to say that United's probably the side I'd be.
Okay, let's move on to Chelsea against Everton. This weekend, it's the return of Carlo Ancelotti to Stamford Bridge, the first time he's managed there since Chelsea sacked him in the bowels of Goodison Park, of course, all those years ago. I'm going to come to you first, Nick. Once we've been through the prices, Chelsea, the home team, 1.869, Everton 4.5, and the draw 3.8. Chelsea minus half a goal on the Asian handicap is 1.862. and Everton plus half a goal, 2.07. Over 2 3/4 goals is even money, 2.0, and the under 2 3/4 goals, 1.9. So, Nick, I'm expecting this to be quite an entertaining game, given the way that Everton have improved and the way that they play under Ancelotti, and given the inconsistencies of Chelsea tend to lead to them, well, at their worst, leaking a lot, and at their best, creating quite a lot. What have you seen when previewing this game in terms of value for us?
So I mentioned how big a game the derby's become for United now in the league context. This is huge for both of those sides now. We're reaching the business end, and Everton have somehow dragged themselves in not just a European battle, but could potentially get themselves in the Champions League race still. They're 5 points behind. And if you look at their next run of 5 games, 4 of the next 5 fixtures are Chelsea, Liverpool, Leicester and Spurs. If they can get the sufficient amount of points out of those 4 games, they've got a really nice-looking final 5 games. So Everton are banging this. Chelsea obviously are still in pole position for 4th, but they're so inconsistent as we've seen from them. I really feel that though that a draw isn't really any good for either side here, and I do think we're going to get the sort of open end-to-end contest, the entertaining game that you alluded to there. The Everton 1-1 draw with United, for me, was a clear overs game. The 3rd goal just didn't come. That can happen in football sometimes. But I thought there were enough good chances in the game that if you had backed overs, you'd have felt you were on the right bet and just got unlucky. Before that, the Everton game at Arsenal was pretty wild, the 3-2. And I thought Everton could count themselves a little bit unlucky to have come out the wrong side of that at the Emirates. And then the game before that, Everton, they beat Palace at home 3-1 against a team that are pretty much under every week. And that game got very open and very stretched, even against Palace. So we're seeing a real trend with Everton under Ancelotti that he's willing to let games get stretched and become basketball matches, if you like, and playing the 4-4-2 most weeks with the 2 up front, 2 out-and-out strikers is sort of allowing that to happen. From Chelsea's perspective, bit of a mixed bag in the goals department. They've had some games that you haven't felt have been particularly over, like the United home game where they sort of had a job done on by United, didn't create enough really, Chelsea. But the Bournemouth game at the weekend, but for a silly 10-minute spell, Chelsea were much the better side. But they had that 10-minute spell, and Bournemouth created enough to score 2 goals in a very open game. This, to me, I thought the over 2.75 line here, I'm surprised it's not 3, actually. I thought the goal line could be a touch higher. I'm more than happy to back over 2 3/4.
Adrian, you looking forward to this game? Ancelotti back and probably playing in front of a fan base that will give him a pretty decent reception, some good memories of his Chelsea team, even if, like so many other managers, it didn't end particularly well.
Well, it ended, didn't it? I think with a defeat at Everton at Goodison Park, he was sort of ushered out the back door. So this, even though it's at Stamford Bridge, it's not a fixture that he's particularly fond of. Chelsea fans loved him. He had a great Chelsea side, didn't he? When they won the double. Look, they are entertaining now. The front 2 are flying. Absolutely flying. And when I think about the matchup and about the positivity of Ancelotti's style and philosophy, I think he will try and get after Chelsea. They've got a clear weakness at centre-half at the moment, whether it's a back 2 or a back 3. I don't think Lampard can really trust any of them, if I'm being perfectly frank. And with the fullbacks being such pivotal players for them, Reece James, Marcus Alonso, obviously it came up trumps last weekend. There are gaps down the sides, and I expect Richarlison to be quite a pivotal figure in the game. Yeah, I think both teams will score. I mean, Everton away from home, that has happened in 11 of 14 games. Both teams have scored, so that shows how open they've been. Chelsea don't score a lot at home, do they? Lowest percentage in the division in terms of home goal ratios. Only 38% of their goals have been at the Bridge. So I think I'm leaning towards the draw. I think it's priced up quite well. I know it doesn't suit either team, but 3.8 is decent. But for me, both teams to score at 1.75 is a strong bet, and that's where I'll be going with it.
What are you saying about this one, Mark O'Hare from We Love Betting?
Yeah, very similar to what the guys are saying, really. A preference towards goals, but also just to kind of add a different strand of thinking to this. I think Chelsea are too short again, odds on. I'd like to oppose them at that kind of price. I also like goals, but Everton away at the big 6 or away at the big teams are notoriously flaky, which is obviously a concern. We talked about their record away at Arsenal, They've not won at Stamford Bridge in the Premier League since 1994. However, there have been signs of progress, significant progress under Ancelotti. Only Liverpool and City earning more points. As the guys have said, they're scoring goals. They've only failed to score twice since October's international break. I thought they competed really well at Arsenal, really probably deserved something out of that game. Took a point away from Old Trafford, narrowly beaten at City as well since Marco Silva was sacked. And I look at this Chelsea team and I just think, you can get plenty of joy out of them. They've struggled defensively, 2 clean sheets since November's international break. It's the Chelsea team that we're missing. Jorginho, Kante, Kovacic and Abraham as well. Have toiled at Stamford Bridge all season, failed to win 8 of 14 games, not really put consistent performances together in 2020 either. I'm not sure Lampard knows his best tactical system or setup. I know he's adapted it to certain teams and opponents, but I still think there's an issue there to be ironed out. And look, Everton aren't the finished article at all. I think there's issues in the midfield that can be quite pedestrian at times. Schneiderlin's missing here as well, so they're certainly not a team to really kind of put your house on at all at the moment for me. But I still think they're capable of playing above the odds. Their odds against to avoid defeat at Stamford Bridge, I think that's fair enough, as well as looking towards a goal-heavy game too.
Yeah, but it's Gilmore mania, isn't it, Ali, at Stamford Bridge? So, it'd be interesting to see if Lampard plays him. He was sensational, wasn't he, in that cup tie? And look, if he starts again, the crowd will be up, and it'd be interesting to see if he can replicate it in Jorginho's absence. So yeah, that's an interesting little side issue.
Gave me some serious flashbacks to I think what would have been then probably a Carling Cup performance by young Josh McEachran against Newcastle. I think it was probably 2010, where he looked like the greatest young player that had ever lived, and has a similar build to Gilmore, but very, very positive signs from Gilmore because, although he lacks a bit of size, the passing range and the barking of orders to teammates, getting stuck in as well, all of it very, very positive.
He looked like a 13-year-old playing in a men's game, didn't he? It was remarkable, but he was brilliant.
He looks exceptionally youthful, that's for sure. Let's crack on with Burnley against Spurs. This is the late game, tea time kickoff, 5:30 on Saturday, and it's at Turf Moor. And we record this just about 12 hours after we've all seen a video and pictures of Eric Dyer running into the stand at Spurs to remonstrate with a fan. Still details to come out, I think, there. But what we're seeing in terms of the prices are that Burnley are the favourites, just about 2.75 Burnley and 2.77 Spurs. The draw 3.32 as we record on Thursday morning. Burnley +0 on the handicap, 1.925. Spurs -0, 1.99. And the goal line is exceptionally low, over 2.25 goals, 1.862. And the under at 2.25, 2.04. So, Adrian, we've got to start with Spurs, really. They're in really poor form. They've lost their last 2 home games, albeit tough games, away at Chelsea and home to Wolves. They're 1-0 down to Leipzig in their Champions League game. They lost on penalties to Norwich in the FA Cup. And to all intents and purposes, their manager seems to be saying that they can't play like a proper team because they don't have any strikers. It makes it tough to really feel too positive about any fixture while that's the case and while the atmosphere is as it is. And Burnley's the sort of archetypal tough place to go. I'm not actually sure if the results back up that narrative, but you can see how it exists with their style of play and with how confident they can be playing in front of their home fans.
Yeah, definitely. Shot-shy Spurs or goal-shy Spurs going to Turf Moor, where Burnley are notoriously tight at the back. Obviously, they've got the second highest number of clean sheets, haven't they, in the division? So I was delighted. I stuck with Nick Pope in my fantasy league team. He's delivering week in, week out, but you don't care about that. But yeah, no, Burnley are hard to score against at Burnley, aren't they? And Spurs, yeah, you're not picturing them going there and playing with gay abandon, are you? So I think this is going to be a scruffy game. Spurs will go back to basics. I'm actually going to go against Tottenham stats here because they've been very flaky on the road, conceded 2 or more in a lot of matches away from the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium this season. But I think they're going to batten down the hatches, and Jose is going to focus on being solid at the back. So that for that reason, I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw here. I know it's an unusual sort of selection, but it's just a hunch that this will be a scruffy, ugly battle at Turf Moor. And when I look at the price, 10.0, it's kind of tempting. So yeah, that's how I see it playing out. I find it hard to see Spurs scoring, one goal, let alone more than that. What do you think, Mark?
I've changed my view, to be honest, overnight since that game against Norwich, because the odds have changed as well. I thought this was really interesting earlier in the week. Spurs were bigger than 2.5. Obviously, they're a lot bigger than that now. But United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Leicester, Liverpool and City have all been to Turf Moor this season. All of them went off as odds-on favourites. They returned 4 wins, 1 draw and 1 defeat. You mentioned, about Burnley being a tough place to go, and it isn't true for the big teams. And I've no doubt that if Spurs had Son and Kane available, they'd be much closer to even money than they are at the moment. But they're not. And obviously, he said what happened in midweek against Norwich and the mood around Spurs at the moment with Mourinho. He has tried to innovate a little bit in the last 2 games with Dele Alli as a false 9, Bergwijn and Lucas Moura in that sort of fluid front 3. But there are issues at both ends of the pitch, because defensively they look so indecisive with that back 3 or back 5 against Wolves. Alderweireld and Vertonghen on the bench just didn't make too much sense to me. He's chopped and changed again midweek. They didn't actually manage a shot on target in the second half against Wolves last week. Serge Aurier, basically their best player on the pitch, and it's really concerning for me. Issues in both boxes. I said they've conceded at least 2 goals in half of their league games under Mourinho. I'm not seeing a huge amount of positivity or progress being made with Spurs, so I did want to oppose them for this game. The schedule is against them as well. It was against them after the Chelsea game, or before the Chelsea game, with Leipzig on the Wednesday, Chelsea the early Saturday game. They've had to play Wolves on the Sunday, Wednesday against Norwich, and now the Saturday evening game at Turf Moor. So that's not ideal at all. And Burnley obviously in a decent run of form themselves, 4 wins from 6 unbeaten games, not conceding goals, concede the fewest goals from set pieces as well. So you wonder where Spurs are really going to hurt them or have a bit of joy out of this team. It's also a Burnley team who've got Ashley Barnes back, Chris Wood back, Rodriguez and Vidra scoring anyway. So, there's a lot to sort of like about this Burnley team. They're only 2 points shy of Spurs, not far off them in most of the performance data metrics either. Throw in home advantage and Spurs' recent performances. They've only won the expected goals count in 3 of their last 12. They were against Norwich twice in the league and Villa, 3 clean sheets in 23. There's no way I can get with Spurs, but suddenly that price is getting bigger and bigger, and you're kind of having to sort of look and go, what price would I take on Spurs in this match, or what handicap line would I take? So originally it was Burnley plus a quarter. Now I'm not so keen. It's down to about 1.7. So no bet for me at the moment.
Okay, leaving that one alone. Goffy, what have you picked out here? As Mark said, the prices have changed overnight, so you've had to, do some adapting to how you looked at this one.
I think it's no surprise that of the games we've discussed, this is the first time we've all come in at a slightly different angle. We've all got a slightly different view and end up in a different place, because this is definitely the hardest Premier League game of the weekend to do audio work around, because there are so many factors that you need to put in, some of which have only turned up last night. Never mind the game, the whole Dyer situation as well. What Adrian said about the way that Tottenham may go and play and try to set up and be defensive there, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they do that. And if you look at a couple of the home games they've had against top sides, Liverpool, Man City and Leipzig, they've tried to be a bit more cautious and have only conceded 1 in each of those games. But fundamentally, I don't think this Tottenham team are capable of being a traditional Mourinho team, if you like. And I think he knows that. I don't think they've got it in them to go there and keep a clean sheet, to be honest. And I think they've got issues at both ends of the pitch. And so what are Tottenham now? I think with Son and Kane out, they're a bona fide mid-table team. That's just all they are. And that can change when those players come back at the beginning of next season with 2 or 3 new players in. They can go back to being a top 4 challenging team very quickly. So it's a temporary thing. But right now, they got Wolves really destroyed them second half on Sunday. There was no luck about what happened last night. They weren't the better side against Norwich. There ended up being about 36 shots in that game last night. So it became really open. They allowed Norwich a lot of opportunity, and they just couldn't stop it. And I think Burnley really blow hot and cold, but their home games have been relatively open. The Bournemouth home game created a lot of chances. There's an Arsenal 0-0 game. That wasn't really a 0-0 game. I thought either side created enough to have scored there. The Leicester home game, they won 2-1. Leicester missed a penalty. There could have been 4 or 5 goals in that game. So tentatively, I'm coming out with the overs here at 2.25 because I feel like at 2.25, the chances of it going under 2 and you losing all of your stake is actually relatively low. I do think Spurs will probably score, and I can't see them keeping a clean sheet, to be honest. So I've kind of ended up coming round to the over. If I had to choose a side, I'd still choose Burnley, even at draw no bet. I do think they should probably be favourites for the game, based on everything that's happened last night as well. And if you take the name Tottenham away and look at the performances and who's playing for them in the last 6 games, they just look like a mid-table team. So it would either be Burnley, draw no bet, or over for me, and I think tentative over.
Okay, yeah, a really interesting game. Probably not a great listen for Spurs fans, but let's move on now to a game in League One, a big game in League One this weekend between Ipswich and Coventry. And Mark has picked out something for us here. Ipswich at 2.54, the home team at Portman Road. Coventry 2.97, the draw 3.22. Ipswich minus a quarter of a goal on the Asian handicap, 2.16, and Coventry plus a quarter of a goal, 1.763. Over 2.25 goals, 2.08, and the under 1.8. Mark, this is a pretty fascinating game. If people have not been following the top of League One over the last few weeks, they've been missing out, but there's still time because it is pretty fascinating. I think there's 3 points at the moment between 3rd and 8th, but Ipswich are 9th. And I went back and looked on Christmas Day. Ipswich were 3rd in the league with 36 points from 20 games. And Coventry were 5th, 2 points behind them, but they played a game more. As we record this morning, Coventry top of the league with 64 points from 33. They're 12 points ahead of Ipswich, and they've played 2 games fewer. That gives us some context of what's happened with these 2 teams in the last 2 months. And what's most interesting for you about the game?
Well, my angle is to have Coventry on side. Obviously, I think anyone with a Football League preference would know that. Coventry plus a quarter of goals being clipped in from 1.8 to about 1.76, you said there. So they've been remarkably consistent this year. It's the first time they've topped the table at this time of the season for about 50-odd years. They've only lost 3 of 33 league games, which is so impressive considering the competitive nature at the top of the table. And also for a team not playing in their home stadium either. So quite an incredible season. Mark Robbins and his staff deserve huge credit for that. They sneaked a win against Sunderland last week, quite a bruising encounter, very physical, had to dig deep defensively, but they've been doing that so often this season that you kind of expect it from them. And I think they're going to be well rested and ready to go again after a midweek off. And I think they've got a great chance here. They've taken 33 points from 39 since mid-December, 6 clean sheets in that 13-game run. Only conceded 2 or more goals 6 times all season, and they scored in all but 1 of the last 20 because Matt Godden's return to fitness and form is kind of completing what is a tremendous little team there. They've got 3 outstanding centre-halves in Rose, McFadden and Hyam, 2 outstanding operators in holding midfield in Walsh and Kelly, Allen and O'Hare supporting Godden as well, decent wing-backs. I think they're just a really effective unit, and I look at this Ipswich team and the nosedive has been sensational. Top of the league after 15 games before the November international break, 33 points from 15. And they've since earned 19 points from 20 games, winning just 4. And you look at the sort of atmosphere surrounding that club at the moment, after midweek where they lost at home to Fleetwood 1-0, boos and protests and chants against the ownership and Lambert himself. They're feeling sorry for themselves, and Lambert's feeling sorry for himself too. He kind of bigged this week up as must win. We've got to win our 2 home games against Fleetwood and Coventry to have any chance of a top 6. Well, they've lost the first one. I felt a little bit sorry for them in terms of selection-wise. There was no Scoos, Hughes or Downs midweek, suspension and injury. I expect them to have at least 2 of those back for Saturday, but leading goal scorers Jackson and Norwood are out again. They failed to score in 5 of the last 8, beaten at home by Oxford, Posh and Fleetwood in 3 of the last 4. So I think it's going to be very, very difficult for them to get a win here. So for that reason, I think Coventry with the start is a very fair play at the prices. Adrian,
how do you begin to analyse what's happening at Ipswich? And in terms of this game, after everything Mark's been through, the undeniable difference in fortunes over the last 3 weeks and the bad vibes at Ipswich, the good vibes at Coventry, as a former player, what has to happen for a team who are in such a slump and a team who are so confident and just absolutely buzzing and picking up points galore? What has to happen for this not to go as planned, I guess?
Yeah, possible complacency, I guess, on the Coventry side. But I don't see that. They're very driven under Mark Robbins. So impressed. I did commentary on the game against Sunderland. And yeah, it was a tight game, but they were clearly the better side. Lots of guile, very well balanced. And Ipswich are a mess at the moment. And they don't look like a team that's playing for the manager. They look like a set of players that have lost faith in the manager's ability to get them promoted this season. So Lambert is going to have to perform some kind of miracle, maybe have a personality transplant between now and the kickoff for Ipswich to come into this one fully motivated. So no, I completely agree with everything Mark said. Coventry look as sure a thing, really, as you can think of. Ipswich at home to sides in the top 11, 8 games they've had at Portman Road. They've scored 2 goals. This is Ipswich. It's been an absolute disaster. So I'm fully on board with Cov.
Okay, nice. Goffy, you've got an EFL selection as well. This one's a Friday night game, available to watch on the telly. I'll actually be in the studio for it, if that's any more of an incentive to cancel any Friday night plans that you might have.
It will be.
On the Forest Millwall game. But Nick, you're going to talk us through why it's interesting. Forest are the home team, 2.4, and Millwall 3.42. The draw 3.22. Forest minus a quarter of a goal. Millwall plus a quarter of a goal. Forest 2.03. And Millwall plus a quarter of a goal, 1.892. Over 2.25 goals, 2.25 is 2.09. And the under 1.84. So Goffy, apart from the fact that it's me in the studio with Stuart Psycho Pearce, and a few others, what is it in terms of the punting that caught your eye here?
I was just a bit surprised to see this open as a quarter ball game. Forest have got a little bit of injury worry. Sambassau's been out for 3 games already. He's still out, but it's not a new injury. He's been out, and they've been coping without him. Thiago Silva will probably miss the game as well. But I feel like the market's probably overreacted a little bit here. I was expecting this to be, if it was quarter ball, sort of 180 Forest at best, and it's odds against minus a quarter here. And I see why the market is a little bit anti-Forest, not just on top of the injuries. They're a workman-like side going into the playoffs rather than a side that can show a lot of flair like your West Broms, like your Leeds, like your Brentfords. But they're up there on merit after 36 games. And some of the criticism of Forest I've just found a little bit unfair. People criticised the performance away at Borough the other evening, Monday night. But we've got to remember, this is the Championship, and games away to Middlesbrough, even though they're in a relegation battle, are darn hard games. And to go there and to match Borough and to get the draw and almost win that game at the end, there's nothing to be ashamed of there whatsoever. The game before, they went to Cardiff, really awkward trip, ground out a 1-0 win. Before that, they drew 0-0 at home to QPR, but the XG data was an avalanche in Forest's favour. Quite unlucky not to win the game. So I don't think Forest are doing much wrong. I think they will be in the playoffs on merit, albeit they're a side with limitations. And I know people say this every year, but if that side went up, they would really struggle without some new additions. Whereas I don't think Leeds would. If Leeds go up, I think they'll be fine. But that's a separate topic. On the Millwall side of things, bit disappointing for me at the weekend in what was really a must-win game against Bristol City. I don't really rate Bristol City. I think they're worse than their league position, and Millwall didn't do enough to win that game. And the game before that, away from home, they got beat 1-0 at Wigan. And some of the things that Rowett said after that game put me off a little bit. He said that it felt like it was a bigger game for Wigan than it was for Millwall. And they were in the thick of a playoff battle. And Millwall won that game, and he sort of alluded to the fact that maybe Millwall wanted it a bit more. And that sort of leads me to believe that this Millwall squad at the moment don't quite see themselves as a top 6 side. They're a year away and they're trying to build towards it and don't really fancy themselves to finish in the top 6 this year. And I think that's fair. You'd like to see that belief in the squad, but I don't think they are quite good enough to finish in the top 6. And if Millwall wanted it, if Wigan wanted it more than that night, why won't Forest on Friday night? Why would it not be the same thing? So a few little red flags about Millwall in the run-in for me. And at minus a quarter, I definitely want to be with Forest here. I think it'll probably go up a bit shorter than this.
Forest, Adrian, are going to have to tackle something that's been a bit of an issue for them in terms of competing with the top teams. Of course, they are in the playoff places, but one of their weaknesses this season has been breaking teams down who sit in that low block, who not play for a 0-0, but essentially cede the ball to them and look to draw them onto them, ask them to create something through bodies. That has been something of an issue for them.
Massively, yeah. I was going to bring up this point, so spot on again, Ali. I looked at teams who have less possession than Forest this season, and there are four. There are only four that have less possession: Cardiff, Hull, Charlton, and Birmingham. Three of those teams went to the City Ground and won. They did batter Birmingham back in August. So that's quite. So stylistically, this is a match that doesn't really suit Forest, but I do agree with Nick there in terms of the form of Millwall isn't great. They haven't been winning many matches of late, too many draws. So I'm seeing a tight game, a low scoring game. I could easily see Millwall nicking it 1-0, but really and truly, would I bet on that? Probably not.
Okay, let's move on to any other business. Mark, I'd like to start with you. I'd like to know if there's anything else that's caught your eye that we haven't specifically covered in depth this weekend. Any value around for us and our listeners?
It's in League Two for me. I'm not sure it's quite a derby, but there's only about 40 minutes between the two teams. Swindon host Forest Green on Saturday. I think we talked a few weeks ago about Swindon before their game against Scunthorpe was postponed, and I said they were definitely one of the top two, if not the best team in League Two. Now 3 points clear with the game in hand after beating Scunthorpe in that rearranged game in midweek. Weren't fantastic, but relatively comfortable at the same point. Now 13 wins from 18 at home, 10 wins from 12 unbeaten home games since September. And they're just super consistent against the teams kind of outside of the playoff places or kind of hovering around mid-table and below. They've won 16 games, drawn twice and lost twice against clubs in 10th and below this season. Really consistent there. They're top in the XG rankings, XG from open play as well. And at home, those figures increased to almost a 70% share. Rob Hunt was missing midweek. He should be back this weekend. Owen Doyle was back on the score sheet as well, which is a relief really after his move back to the club in January. So it's really hard to find faults in Swindon at the moment. The data projects them really strongly. The players available are excellent. The form they're in, the home form. And I can see this price contracting quite significantly before Saturday. They're very well rested after a few recent postponements. I know Richie Wellens said that the games off didn't really help them in midweek because they're a little bit rusty, but they've blown the cobwebs away now. And I just don't think Forest Green are going to be a match for them because the mood has really turned there. Supporters turning against Mark Cooper. Injuries haven't helped as well, but it's 2 wins in 20 across all competitions, 9 defeats in 16 league games, 5 points from 27 against the top 7, 3 clean sheets in 19. They seem to have lost their identity a little bit in recent weeks. And as I say, I think the money will come for Swindon. You can get around 1.82, 1.83 on the high street. So I suggest that's available on the exchange when liquidity arrives, but I don't expect it to be there for Saturday. So Swindon to win reasonably comfortably on Saturday.
This is why it's worth watching the live stream, 9:45 every Thursday morning. Get ahead of the money. That's what we're saying here. Once Marco there talks about a selection, it tends to tighten, shall we say. Adrian, any other business?
Yeah, I'm going to go close to home here. I'm going to look at Arsenal, West Ham. I think, well, for starters, West Ham were good last weekend, weren't they? They're certainly more positive against Southampton. And to be fair, they're scoring more goals now. They've found their form at that end of the pitch. But Moyes has a real sort of inferiority complex at Arsenal. He's never won at Emirates. He usually comes away with the tail between his legs, and I just feel that he will play it. He'll revert to type here, and he'll be a little bit more cautious in their approach, and I think that will help Arsenal. I think Arsenal are starting to find their groove. Left out a lot of their key players against Pompey in the FA Cup. They'll come back nice and fresh. They've been scoring goals now, I think, for 7 in the last couple of home games at Emirates Stadium. And Arsenal-West Ham games, traditionally, Arsenal have scored a lot of goals. I think it's something like 10-2 on aggregate the last 3 games at home to West Ham. So I'm quite confident of an Arsenal win here, but my pick will probably be over 3 goals in the game. It could be a 3-0, it could be 3-1, 2-1, 3-1, 3-2. It could be an exciting game, but yeah, over 3 goals, 2.04. I fancy that big time.
You just know that game's going to be dramatic just by the fact that it's Arsenal against West Ham. You know there'll be something that'll spring up there. Nick, Goff, any other business this weekend?
One game I'd like to mention is in League One. I think League One's been so fascinating this season, and it's going to stay that way till the end. Shrewsbury against Oxford, I find, is a really interesting game. One thing, we're getting to that stage of the season now where you do have sometimes motivation can be overplayed, and it can be a sort of a buzzword that can get talked about too much. But motivation is a thing, and towards the end of the season, there will be sides in mid-table who take their foot off the gas just a little bit, and that can make all the difference. And trying to figure out which teams will go hard to the end in mid-table and which teams might take the foot off the gas is an important part of making betting decisions. And so I'll give an example in League One of a team who. So this is what's really hard is that you can see from a small sample size 2 or 3 performances maybe that look like a team are regressing, but actually that could just be 2 or 3 bad performances, and it could be a false flag. But an example might be Accrington Stanley, who for me have got them. They're a small side at League One level that got themselves safe, and it's possible that in April and May, Accrington might just be the sort of team who feel their job's done. And it looked a little bit like it's going that way, but in the last few weeks, we've only seen it happen twice. So we need to see it a bit more before we can say it conclusively. But I'd keep my eye on Accrington as a side who might sort of coast home. I know they won't admit it; the manager would never say that, but it might still happen. On the other side of that coin, a team that I think in mid-table will keep going to the end this year is Shrewsbury Town. I think Shrewsbury at their best are quite a good side, but they sit in lower mid-table. They had they drew a lot of games they were the better side in early in the season and couldn't quite get themselves on a roll. Then they had a big distraction with the FA Cup run and got to play Liverpool twice, and then ended up with a lot of Tuesday, Saturday league games, which for a squad of their size proved too much for them. But since they've gone back to 1 game a week, they actually look like half a decent side again, and they picked up 6 from their last 9. They've beaten Doncaster at home. They went away to Bristol Rovers and really dominated that game and were much better sided, a 1-0 win. And I feel like Shrewsbury are going to keep going. So what I'm doing here is actually opposing Oxford United, who have just won 4 on the bounce. But if there's ever a league you're going to oppose a team who have won 4 on the bounce this year, it's going to be League One, because this is almost like a merry-go-round. Teams do win 4 on the bounce, look like they're about to get in an automatic promotion race, then disappear. We've seen it happen to 5 or 6 teams. Ipswich we talked about earlier. Peterborough have done it. They're now outside the top 6, having looked like they're about to get themselves in the automatic battle again. I still think Peterborough will probably finish top 6, but they've had their little dip since Ivan Toney got injured. And maybe it's Oxford's turn now on the back of 4 wins, because let's be honest, when they sold the 2 lads to Brentford, a lot of us wrote Oxford off for the season, having been a playoff contender for most of the season. It looked like it might be a bridge too far, and they'd be one of the ones that would miss out. They've now won 4 games on the bounce, and everyone's talking about them being a top 6 side again. But maybe this is the point at which we sell Oxford, if you like, and the price justifies us doing so. Shrewsbury lost a quarter at home, so we're getting paid half our money if Shrewsbury even get a point. And I think there's a fair chance they can nick this game and end Oxford's run. So at the price, I want to be with Shrewsbury.
Okay. Lastly, the best bets of the weekend, one from each of you. Try and keep it relatively short. Mark, what's the best bet of the weekend?
Well, yeah, I just mentioned it recently there. Swindon to beat Forest Green on Saturday. They've won 10 of 12 unbeaten home games since September. Top all the ratio rankings, won 16 of 20 against teams in 10th and below. Forest Green aren't in a good place, and I can guarantee that 1.82 won't be there for Saturday.
Compelling. Adrian?
Yeah, I might take that on myself. It looks like a home banker. I just think Coventry, Ipswich are in such a state. Coventry will smell blood, I think, at Portman Road and come out on top there.
Intriguing. And Nick, what's your best bet of the weekend? I think we might have just lost Nick, actually, but hopefully over the course of the last 44, 45 minutes, you've heard enough from Nick Goff to know what he fancies and what he wasn't so keen on. That's all from this week's Matchbook Weekend Football podcast. It's been a pleasure being with Mark, with Nick, and with Adrian, going through some big games in the Premier League, but also getting plenty of flavour from elsewhere. I feel like the EFL has been well covered this week. So thank you. Join us same time next week. Make sure you're tuned in to the live show, and you can make sure that you get the best prices before they get sliced. Thanks for joining us. As always, we'll be back again this time next week.